generally Thursday for most of us. Dry, fine, with some lengthy spells of sunshine. Still quite breezy across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but light winds elsewhere and feeling pretty pleasant in the sunshine, with temperatures again getting into the high teens or maybe up into 22 or 23 across the southeast of England.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, is the apocalypse coming? Because that's what the Governor of the Bank of England suggests is going to happen with food prices. Is he right? I don't think he is. I think he's covering up for his own terrible failures with inflation. We'll talk about a footballer, frontline footballer, coming out as gay and being treated as a hero. Do we care about his personal life, or do we care about his football? Volunteer police officers to be given tasers. Can we trust them with them? I really rather hope we can. And joining me on Talking Pints, Dame Jenny Murray, broadcasting legend. But before all of that, let's get the news.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. A Conservative MP has been arrested on suspicion of rape and sexual assault offences. The unnamed man, aged in his 50s, is also accused of abusing a position of trust and misconduct in public office. Scotland Yard says the offences are alleged to have taken place in London between 2002 and 2009. The Tory Chief Whip has asked him to stay away from Parliament during the investigation. A serial rapist who attacked women over nearly 3 decades has been found guilty of murder at Reading Crown Court. 66-year-old Donald Robertson was convicted of killing Shani Warren. Her body was found bound and gagged in Taplow Lake in Buckinghamshire in 1987. He was charged after a police cold case team discovered new DNA evidence linking him to her death. He was also found guilty of kidnapping and raping a teenager in 1981. The European Union has warned it will respond with all measures at its disposal if the UK breaks the Northern Ireland Protocol. European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic says practical solutions to problems have been offered, but the UK has failed to meet them halfway. The Foreign Secretary has set out plans to rewrite Britain's post-Brexit trading agreement, changing the rules on how goods enter Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. Liz Truss says the government is still open to negotiations and the new measures don't break international law.
This is not about scrapping the protocol. Our aim is to deliver on the protocol's objectives. We will cement those provisions which are working in the protocol, including the common travel area, the single electricity market, and North-South cooperation, whilst fixing those elements that aren't, on the movement of goods, goods regulation, VAT, subsidy control and governance.
Boris Johnson has defended plans to give volunteer police officers powers to use tasers, saying it's the government's crucial duty to make communities safer. Under new Home Office plans, special constables will be allowed to carry tasers if authorised by their chief officers. Amnesty International is calling the move dangerous, though, saying misuse can lead to harm and even death. But the Home Secretary says the measures will ensure volunteers are not at a disadvantage when facing knife attackers or terror threats. And the Queen has made a special appearance at London's Paddington Station, officially opening the completed Elizabeth line named in her honour. The 96-year-old monarch was joined by her youngest son, Prince Edward, who became the first passenger travelling to Tottenham Court Road. The line opens to the public next week. Well, on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Farage.
Good evening. Is the apocalypse coming? I know, what a question. Well, Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, suggested yesterday, talking to MPs in committee, that there was an apocalypse coming, and he was referring specifically to food prices. And when it came to inflation, he said, don't blame us, Gov. Not our fault, nothing to do with us whatsoever. No, it's all to do with Ukraine. We obviously couldn't predict a war in Ukraine. Now, the key role of the Bank of England since it was given its independence in the late 1990s is to control inflation, and they have a target of 2% to stick to. And no one's pretending for a moment that all of this is easy. But I'll tell you what, I've been saying since last January that it was pretty clear that inflationary signs were growing within the economy. But oh no, not the Governor of the Bank of England. He told us it wasn't happening. And then when it did start to rear its head in the summer of last year, well, once again, don't worry your poor little heads. It's just transitory. And now it's happening. It's all the fault of Vladimir Putin. Well, the truth of it is, even before the invasion of Ukraine, inflation was well set, and the governor has bungled. Andrew Out to Lunch Bailey, as he was known in his time in the city, and particularly when he ran the FCA, and did, by all accounts, a pretty poor job. I was disappointed in the extreme when he was appointed as Bank of England governor. But is he right to say an apocalypse is coming in terms of food prices? Well, Archie Norman, the chairman of Marks & Spencer, estimates that food prices will rise by 10% this year. And it's difficult for me to sit here and to promise you there won't be shocking rises in food prices. There may well be. There's certainly an even bigger risk perhaps for households when it comes to energy. But tell me, what do you think? Is an apocalypse coming? Farage at gbnews.UK. Well, joining me to discuss the governor and these extraordinary comments is Vicky Price, chief economist at the CEBR. Vicky, I can't think of a governor of the Bank of England, certainly in my lifetime following economics and politics, using a word like apocalypse. It's pretty extraordinary, isn't it?
It's really interesting because he's not the only one who's using words like that. The World Bank itself said very recently, that was the head of the World Bank, in fact, talking about a potential human catastrophe because of the food price increases. And what they've done is they've set up a special fund, which is at present $170 billion, to use for the poorer nations, which of course are right now the ones that are worst affected. And it's interesting, we talked about, the price increases that Archie Norman was referring to, which are, by comparison to how fast food prices are going up across the world, pretty modest. And if you look at food inflation right now, it's at around 6%. So what's been going on is that they haven't been passing, those supermarkets, on all the costs of the extra prices they have to pay themselves in terms of the ingredients they're putting into their food, which they sell to us. So for the moment, yes, of course, it is very significant by comparison to where we were just a few months ago, but it isn't apocalyptic yet. in terms of what the consumer has to pay.
No, and we know that Ukraine's very important in terms of wheat production. I think 80% of the sunflower oil that we use in this country comes from Ukraine. Odessa, of course, they've got stocks they can't safely get out. I do understand all of this. I'm not downplaying the difficulties, but I still think it's a very irresponsible, somewhat fear-mongering word for someone like that to use. And I suggest to you that he's doing it to cover up for his own incompetence in terms of managing inflation and getting all his predictions wrong.
Yes, but if you look at what the CPI has been doing recently, which is the consumer price inflation, which of course has been rising, as you rightly have been saying, for some time, but now really rather fast, the major components there are food prices, even though, yes, 6% food price increase is quite significant as part of the overall CPI, and energy. So those are the two areas that have been rising. Both of those are external factors. So you can forgive him for using those words, because the reality is that he's not the only central banker who's been affected by this. We've seen the Federal Reserve in the US, we have seen the European Central Bank, which hasn't even raised interest rates yet, although it's promising to do so.
It will.
They all, of course, they all have been, yes, okay, perhaps they didn't quite expect that increase, but they've all been surprised by what's been happening and unable to react, because if you raise interest rates here, or even if you restrict the amount of money that's in the economy, in reality you're going to be hitting all those people whose main spending is food and energy. And those are not really going to suddenly start coming down because you've raised interest rates.
I completely understand external shocks. The Yom Kippur War of 1973 led to the price of oil tripling in short order. That was a genuine external shock. But there is also monetary inflation. There is also, what's happened ever since 2008 with quantitative easing, and particularly during the pandemic. The government has massively increased the money supply. So there's more money in circulation chasing the same number of goods and services, and perhaps unsurprisingly, shortages and rising prices. And the Governor of the Bank of England, the point I'm making to you on the economics of it is, the Governor of the Bank of England has misread this right the way through and is not acknowledging his responsibility here.
Well, again, I would say that the increase in this monetary liquidity has been pretty widespread. So you've seen huge increases in quantitative easing, as we call it, which is basically the Bank of England buying government bonds in the secondary market. We saw that, as you rightly said, during the financial crisis, and now, of course, with COVID. And the reason why we needed to do that is because the economy was dropping. And if you remember, we had deflation for a while, so prices were falling. I mean, oil prices were negative for a while, which is quite an extraordinary situation to find yourself in. Now, if the monetary authorities, like the Bank of England, like the European Central Bank, like the Federal Reserve in the US, if they hadn't intervened and used all that money to buy those bonds in the secondary market, there wouldn't have been investors wanting to buy them. So what they've been doing basically is financing the government's fiscal side, and that's been pretty good for the economy, because otherwise we wouldn't be talking where we are now.
We know what they've done, but it's the fact they're not admitting their own role in this. I mean, finally, Vicky, do you think this guy is the right guy to be the Governor of the Bank of England?
Well, the interesting thing about the Bank of England is that, particularly on interest rates and monetary policy generally, there is an independent body, or the Monetary Policy Committee, which decides this. And the role of the governor is to vote one way or another at the end of the day, and maybe swing the vote if necessary. But of course he's responsible for all sorts of other things, like financial stability. So, the banks, are they operating? Is the market operating properly? The person you put there has quite a range of things under him. And there are loads of very strong people.
But is he any good?
Well, whatever you may think of him.
Is he any good, Vicky?
I think he's been doing the right thing so far.
All right, well, Vicky Price, thank you. She's always so polite. I think he's hopeless. I think there were far better candidates. I really, really do. But there we are. Now, law and order, and whether we should arm our police officers or not, is one of those debates that goes on and on and on. And we've historically in this country done our very best not to arm our police officers too much. But times have changed. And of course, tasers are quite commonly used. About 30,000 times a year, tasers are used by police officers in this country. Well, now there's a proposal coming from the Home Secretary, Priti Patel. And the idea is that our specials, will be able to use tasers, provided they've had the right degree of training. Now, Amnesty International and others are screaming blue murder, saying this is all wrong. Others are saying we can't trust the police as far as we can throw them. I have to say, for my part, if I was giving up my free time to go and help police and perhaps be called in to deal with street protests, riots, in I have to say, a country with an increasing level of street violence, I think I'd want a taser. I certainly do. Now, joining me is Chris Phillips, former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office and Managing Director of the International Protect and Prepare Security Office. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
It's always difficult, isn't it? You know, when I go to America, I see police officers with guns everywhere and a lot of killings that take place every year, and it leads to all sorts of disputes. And we've generally not wanted to overarm our police officers, I think. I mean, would that be a right description of the British attitude towards policing?
Yeah, quite right. And I think actually most police officers wouldn't want to be armed. Arming police officers just brings more guns into society, and that's not a good thing. But there's got to be some way of dealing with the very violent situations that officers are now finding themselves in particular in the inner cities. Now, in my day, I could pretty much rely on people to support me in the police. Now, unfortunately, the people are actually setting on the police in groups, and that's a really difficult position for officers to be in.
We saw a situation over the weekend in Dalston, in East London, where a group of police officers were going to arrest some people who were in the country illegally, with the aim of getting them deported. And yeah, the public on the streets, or political activists, or whoever they were, physically turned against the police officers. So, I mean, I completely understand what you're saying. Now, it is true, of course, that with these 30,000, every year, 30,000 times a taser is used, there were 16 people that died. Now, it is also true to say they all had pre-existing conditions. But do you understand the concerns of what are seen as volunteer police officers having tasers?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the difficulty is we're asking these volunteers, normal members of the public, to go out onto the streets to act as normal police officers. You know, at a time actually when policing has become much more difficult, much more complicated than ever before, and they're having to deal with very difficult situations. Now, if we're expecting them to do that, then you should give them the tools to do the job. And I think what Priti Patel has done here is actually say to chief constables, if you think your people are able to deal with this and have the tasers, then they should.
So it's the 43 individual police forces that will make this decision, and to perhaps reassure our viewers and listeners, these volunteers will have to reach a certain level of competence, won't they?
Yeah, they will, and they will have had to have a certain amount of training, obviously, the same training as the officers, standard officers, but also they will be expected to have done a certain amount of policing. I think my biggest concern on this is that we do have a situation where policing is getting more complicated. Special constables, whatever, and we love them to bits, but actually they cannot do and get the amount of experience. It takes a long, long time to do that. So we've got to be a little bit careful about treating them as normal officers, but they also have to be protected, and I think this is a good move.
Why is the level of public trust in police falling the way that it is?
I think policing has been politicised. I think policing back from Theresa May's day and David Cameron absolutely messed up with bringing in PCCs, police crime commissioners. They've actually politicised the police, and actually then it does look as though one side is against the other, whichever side you're on. And of course all the different things that we've had split in society as well, at a time when people just don't respect authority anymore.
So it's not just the police?
It's not just the police, is it? I mean, we know that the ambulance drivers are getting assaulted, fire brigade are getting assaulted. We've got teachers that seem to be unable to teach certain children because they are just so unruly. And I think, it does come down to our society and what we've allowed ourselves to be. And actually we should be supporting the police as much as we can to do the job that's becoming more and more difficult.
Well, Chris Phillips, I can assure you I certainly am doing that. And on that point of societal breakdown, of course, just disgusting behaviour, I thought, disrespectful behaviour, whatever your view, at the FA Cup final at the weekend, a section of Liverpool supporters, booing the national anthem, jeering Prince William, a future king of this country. They should be delighted that someone like William is taking such a prominent role in football. But no, we are seeing in our cities a degree of societal breakdown. It is disturbing, it is worrying. I often think actually parts of our modern day cities are frankly diseased. In a moment, we will talk not just about Liverpool football fans, we'll talk about a frontline footballer coming out as gay and being lauded as a hero. But do we care? Surely we're more interested in what he does on the pitch.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Is the Governor of the Bank of England right? Is it apocalypse now when it comes to food prices? I think he has over-exaggerated this enormously and spread fear where it didn't need to be spread. Your thoughts on it coming through. One viewer says, people must not put their eggs in one basket. There are other countries outside the EU that government can buy from. Well, that's certainly true. I do also wonder how the rewilding plan is going, you know, where we pay farmers not to produce food, but to produce environments where the wolf or the beaver can come back to the British landscape. I hope those plans are being put on hold. Sorry, Carrie, sorry, Goldsmith family, but I think perhaps food security, rather like energy security, needs to become an issue. Another viewer says it will get a whole lot worse if Johnson & Truss annoy the EU enough. I thought Brexit was meant to make food cheaper. That is a really good and a very fair point. And the argument for cheaper food with Brexit is that foods and goods coming in from outside the European Union were subject to tariffs, subject to taxes, and therefore by leaving the EU, we could buy those goods at much cheaper prices. And that includes wine, cut flowers, and many other things. Truth of it is, we haven't done enough of that since Brexit, although I do think we're on our way. Joe says, yes, we are. Joe thinks we're headed towards a food apocalypse. Well, maybe she's right. And Wayne says, everything that is happening could have been avoided if the government had acted sooner and not party their way into oblivion. You know, we can blame the Downing Street get-togethers and the beer-ups that took place in Durham, but I don't think they're responsible for all of our ills, even though some of you are very angry about them. Although I noticed in Hull last week when we were out there with Farage at large that most people, frankly, have become just a little bit bored with Partygate. But let me tell you what they're not bored with, and that is scandal. That is sleaze. And it's been a tough time The truth is, for both parties, both the Conservative and Labour Party have had a difficult time with sleaze, with some really terrible accusations and indeed convictions over the course of the last couple of years. But the story that broke just a couple of hours ago is bigger than any of those stories, potentially. In fact, bigger than almost anything any MP that I can think of, certainly in my lifetime, has ever been accused of. It would be, if we had the name of the MP, the top story today, but it's not. But to bring us up to speed with this development is Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. Darren, what's happened?
Well, and it's not the top story because obviously there are certain things we can and cannot report at this stage because there is an active criminal investigation underway. So first of all, let me talk you through what the Met have at least said, as you say, in the last hour or so. And they said that a man in his 50s has been arrested on suspicion of indecent assault, sexual assault, rape, abuse of position of trust and misconduct in public office, so quite a litany of allegations there. The offences are said to have occurred in London between 2002 and 2009, and that officers are now from the Central Specialist Crime Unit looking into this. The MP involved is currently in custody.
So he's been arrested?
He's been arrested.
In custody,
currently in
but
custody,
not yet charged.
And not yet charged. Now, the reason we know he's an MP is because at the same time as the Met were issuing that statement, we also got a one from the Tory Chief Whip, the Conservative Chief Whip, Chris Heaton-Harris, and he says that the MP concerned has been told not to attend the parliamentary estate, essentially to stay away from that place across the road while the investigation is ongoing. But the expectation, and of course this is also partly the reason that the man remains unnamed, we do live in a system where you're innocent until proven guilty, is that the Conservative Party will not remove the whip until those investigations are concluded. But, you know, it's a pretty serious litany of allegations.
And we're not prejudging anything here at GB News, and you're quite right, you know, presumption of innocence before guilt and all the rest of it is a vital part of what this country is. But I want to say this to you, I can't remember an MP being arrested on a charge of rape. This is the first time, isn't it?
Well, of course, we had Imran Khan not that long ago who was convicted of it, and it's now going to be a by-election in
That wasn't
Wakefield.
a specific charge of rape, was it?
No, and you're right, this is a very serious, and it's not just that, I mean, this is a very serious set of allegations over the space of 7 years, it must be said, as well, dating back quite a long time. And you're right, you know, as I say, we have to wait until the police investigation is concluded, but there will be concerns that yet again, even these allegations will taint that place across the road and people's perception at a time in which public opinion, it must be said, of politicians, given a whole series of scandals, is pretty low.
Yeah, and we have had. I mean, this feels like 1996 all over again. You know, the Back to Basics campaign and endless sleaze allegations coming out about Conservative members of Parliament. But Labour are suffering with this too, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. We know, for example, Liam Byrne, the former Chief Secretary of the Treasury under Gordon Brown, I mean, he got suspended from Parliament for bullying for a couple of days. So it's fair to say this is not confined to one political party.
Peterborough MP, you know, she had to go.
Indeed. And obviously the Conservative have got a lot more MPs, possibly the why that weighs more heavily in terms of the number of allegations against that. But I think what this is, not this particular story, but I think in general what we have seen really since the start of the year, and there are suggestions, and we've seen this reported elsewhere, that, you know, there are concerns and allegations about other MPs, including senior MPs.
Well, the Sunday Times suggested that up to 56 people.
Yeah, there's dispute about that. There is dispute about that, and just kind of what on the scale of those 56 are. I mean, clearly there's a big difference between rumour and gossip, right through to MPs being arrested, for example, or indeed charged or convicted. So I think that's a very wide basket, if you get what I mean. But fundamentally, this is going to raise lots and lots of questions, not just for political parties and how they manage their politicians, how they frankly select some of their candidates coming into the next election. There's a feeling, and this was reflected actually by Mark Spencer, the leader of the House of Commons, that some of the MPs that may well have ended up in the 2017-2019 intake because of the quickness of those elections, that the due diligence wasn't done, though we're not suggesting that, of course, any new intake of MPs has been involved in any wrongdoings, more about the calibre of MPs, if you get it, but also for Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, about what goes on across the road and what goes on in Parliament. We don't know, obviously, whether what's gone on here has got any connection to Parliament. It happened a very long time ago, over a period of 7 years. It did happen in London. But yes, it is a reminder that that is an unusual place in which unusual things happen, and which MPs, frankly, are going to have to sort out what happens in politics, because at the moment, as I say, the place is marred in scandal, frankly, and public opinion of MPs, and of that place, the heart of our democracy, is not at a great level.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, and I would also say, you know, the public opinion of the House of Lords, not just the House of Commons, and the public increasingly don't like the House of Lords. Final quick thought, Darren, whilst you're here. May the 5th has come and gone. The Conservatives lost about 1 in 4 seats they were defending across the country. It's sort of, as the Friday went on, it just got a bit worse and a bit worse and a bit worse as we got the results in.
Yeah, particularly from Scotland and Wales,
Scotland,
of course.
Wales, yeah, absolutely. But is Boris Johnson looking relatively secure?
Yeah, I think he is in many regards. We have to remember, though, of course, and that is because of expectation management. There are MPs who were very concerned about this. We saw Jeremy Hunt, for example, at the weekend doing a tour of the Sunday studios, making it clear that this is not great for lots of MPs, particularly in the south of England, having lost seats.
So he's being really helpful.
Indeed, yes. Some might suggest he may want to run again at some point, God forbid. But I think ultimately we still have got a few tricky periods for the Prime Minister down the line. Sue Gray's report, potential of more fixed penalty notice fines for him and others inside Downing Street. But ultimately, and you've just been talking about it, there is little doubt that the biggest issue that potentially will decide the future of the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party is this cost of living crisis, about trying to get it right, trying to get that balance right that you and I talk about trying to not make things worse by spending loads of money that you're just making domestic inflation worse, but at the same time trying to help those that clearly need it. And it boils down to, you know, the old cliche of it's the economy, stupid. And well, frankly, if Partygate doesn't unseat Boris Johnson, and that seems unlikely now, you're right, voters seem quite bored of the issue, at least at the moment, is that in 2 years' time, if there is an election, if people feel a hell of a lot worse off, if they feel that their standards of living have dropped...
That is a real issue.
Who gets the blame for that? Normally, in normal political times, it's the government.
Yeah, absolutely. Darren, thank you very much indeed. Well, a pretty serious situation. We'll see what unravels over the course of the next few days. But for an MP to be arrested with that long list of very serious charges and held, it's quite a development. Now, a What the Farage moment. It's 30 years ago that Justin Fashanu, who was playing for Norwich, came out as gay. And there's been no prominent footballer over the course of the last 30 years that has come out as gay. Now, it may well be they feel the fans would give them a hard time. I do understand that. But what I find pretty extraordinary is the Blackpool Football Club player, Jake Daniels. Now, this is a 17-year-old, clearly a very, very talented young lad. He's already in youth football scored a lot of goals. The player has got real ability. And he's come out as gay. And to look at the reaction from the British media, I mean, he is being hailed as a hero. You know, there it is. It's the top of the Times. It's the front page of the Independent. It's the front page of the Eye. And this is the big story. He's a hero because he's come out as gay. Well, it may be a brave thing to do, given that nobody else has over the course of the last 30 years. Well, undoubtedly, some could. But I wonder whether we're getting our priorities right. You know, we're talking here about a footballer. We should judge him on what he does on the pitch. And frankly, I'm not really interested in his private life. I'm not really interested in what his religion is. I just don't care. I'm just not interested. And I bet you that amongst most football fans, the vast majority of football fans, that is the case. Yes, there will always be some on the terraces shouting and jeering and saying unpleasant things, whether it's to footballers like this or whether it's the disrespect shown to Prince William and Her Majesty the Queen. But I just think if we treat somebody as a hero for coming out as gay, I wonder whether we've got just a very, very odd and somewhat warped sense of priorities. I wish him luck. I wish him well. I hope he doesn't get too much abuse from the stands. I really don't think, by the way, that he will. And let's hope he goes on to have a great football career. But that is how we should judge people. That certainly is my view. Now, You've got to go out and buy an electric motor car. It's absolutely vital. Everyone's telling you to do it. You can save the planet. Now, these cars are very expensive, though there are some quite good tax breaks if you've got enough money to buy one. But there is a problem, and it is the number of chargers. Now, unless we increase monthly installations by a whopping 350%, we are not going to meet the 2030 target. In fact, we're lagging terribly. We need to put in 3,000 new installations a month, and currently we're putting in just over 600. It's not working. There was a journalist, Ian Dale, gave a report of a journey he had back from the north of England to Kent. It should have taken him 4 hours. It took him nearly 11 hours because he just couldn't find a charging station. And a friend of mine has just splashed out a lot of money buying a new electric black cab. And he is struggling like crazy in the middle of the day in central London to find any charging points that are free. So it's all well and good to encourage us to use electric cars, but without the infrastructure, frankly, it just cannot and will not work. And I wonder whether the government maybe rethink some of their enthusiasms. Now, one other little story, which I think is shocking. We don't know the name of the school, but a girl challenged a speaker from the House of Lords, came to a school to talk about trans issues. And this particular girl argued that biological sex is real. And this was after being lectured about transphobia. And what transpired next is truly shocking. She was afterwards surrounded by 60 of her friends who screamed endless, nasty abuse at her for daring to challenge the orthodoxy. And she actually collapsed as a result of it. And she's not really going back to school anymore. And this is so disturbing and so worrying. We should allow people to have different opinions without screaming and shouting at them. It is wrong. Let's have a piece of really good news. So much speculation about Her Majesty the Queen as she did not attend the state opening of Parliament. And then over the weekend, we saw some quite happy pictures of the Queen. There she was at the Windsor Horse Show. Well, today, I think this was a bit of a surprise for most people. Today she turned up to launch the Elizabeth line. This is a new tube line running right across from Reading right out through the east of London. Now, it's been somewhat expensive at £19 billion, and it was meant to open 5 years ago, but at last it's opened, unlike Crossrail, and Her Majesty the Queen turned up at Paddington Station to do the unveiling.
The Queen took everyone by surprise when she suddenly appeared at Paddington Station. People may have complained about the delayed Crossrail project, but it was all smiles as Boris Johnson and the Mayor for London, Sadiq Khan, welcomed the monarch and her youngest son. Her Majesty looked round the station entrance to the Elizabeth line, which has been appropriately designed in royal purple. She also met train drivers and station staff and unveiled a plaque to mark the completion of the project. The Elizabeth line runs from west to east and officially opens next Tuesday. And should the Queen wish to visit again, she was given her own Oyster payment card. Despite recently struggling with her mobility, the 96-year-old went to the Windsor Horse Show on Friday and on Sunday was the guest of honour at an equestrian event near Windsor. But today is the first engagement that the Queen has been to outside of the Windsor area since she attended the Duke of Edinburgh's memorial service in Westminster Abbey 7 weeks ago. With only 2 weeks to go until the Platinum Jubilee weekend, it seems as if everything is on the right track. Alice Porter, GB News.
Well, wasn't that great to see the Queen out there doing those duties? That really cheers us all up, I think, for the Jubilee, which is not too far away. And she was able to top up an Oyster card. Rishi Sunak didn't know how to use a credit card, did he? Hey. In a moment, I'm going to be joined on Talking Pints by a genuine broadcasting legend, Dame Jenny Murray. For 33 years, she presented Woman's Hour. We're going to ask her about women's issues, trans issues, and much else.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up on The Mark Steyn Show. As the Bank of England warns of apocalyptic food prices, Laura Perrins joins to discuss her take on spiking inflation. Natalie Winters has uncovered evidence which proves face masks have no use whatsoever when it comes to COVID. Plus, a Tuesday treaty. Former US presidential candidate Michelle Bachmann won't be holding back when it comes to the World Health Organization's apparent plan to take over the world. All that and more on The Mark Steyn Show from 8 o'clock.
Welcome back. Yes, it's Talking Pints. It's that time of the day now. In the immediate after World War II period, the BBC came up with a programme called Woman's Hour, and someone that presented it for a remarkable 33 years, I think she does actually genuinely qualify as a broadcasting legend, is Dame Jenny Murray, and I'm very pleased to say she joins me for Talking Pints.
Now, I have never drunk a pint. In fact, I don't like beer. So what I opted for was a vodka and very slimline tonic. And this is the first time in my entire broadcasting career that I have sipped alcohol with a microphone on me. So cheers.
Cheers. Welcome.
This is a whole new experience.
Well, GB.
Very nice.
Is it well made?
Yes.
Good.
Very well made with ice and lemon. Perfect.
Couldn't be better. Well, you see, GB News is here to do things a little bit differently, and that's what we do. It really interesting to think, 1946, this new programme comes along, which must have been sort of, in a way, quite radical for its day.
It was very radical. What was really radical about it was presented by a man for the first few months, and there were lots of complaints from women saying, why do we have to have a man broadcasting to us about these kind of subjects? People assumed that in those early days it was very soft and it was all about knitting and cooking.
But it wasn't.
Not true. Absolutely not true. You know, there were lots of discussions about my job. What kind of job can I do? How easy is it going to be for me to work? There was a whole series about the menopause. You know, everybody's up in arms at the moment about the menopause. Oh, my goodness, we can't get our HRT. 1946, Woman's Hour was talking about it.
And you were a young girl growing up in Barnsley in the 1950s, and this programme...
1950, and so my mother always used to say, you know, there was a very strict feeding schedule in those days, 4-hourly. And 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is when the programme used to be broadcast, was broadcast at that time for years and years and years. And my mother always used to say, Now, I'd been busy in the morning, I'd done the washing, I'd cleaned up the kitchen, I'd prepared the cake for your dad when he was coming home, and 2 o'clock I sat down to listen to Woman's Hour, and I fed you at 2 o'clock. So clearly I was raised.
It was meant to be.
I was raised on Woman's Hour.
It was meant to be.
Absolutely.
And you obviously do well at school and university, but you decide that broadcasting is what you want to do.
I thought I wanted to act. From being very small, my mother, for which I am eternally grateful, sent me for what are normally called elocution lessons. My teacher called them speech and drama lessons. But it did teach me how to use my voice and all that sort of thing. And I loved always being in the school play. In fact, my maths teacher, who told me to leave her class in the 4th form because her name was Mrs. Aviard. And those of us who were not very good at maths called it Aviard's graveyard, unsurprisingly. And she was standing at the front of the class and she put a calculus question to me, and I was completely befuddled. And she said, "Jennifer Bailey," I was Jennifer Bailey in those days, "have you been learning poetry again and performing in the school play?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Yes, is this the reason why your mathematics is so appalling? I cannot understand why a girl of your obvious intelligence is so hopeless. I suggest you drop the subject," which panicked me because I thought, well, I'm not going to get into university. So I went to talk to the headmistress about it, and she said, "Look, if you do a science, you'll be all right." In those days, you didn't have to. In those days, it was a long time ago. You didn't have to do maths if you did biology, physics, or chemistry. I did biology, walked it.
Good for you.
Fine.
But
I got in.
But then in many ways in life, the great skill is to find what we are good at, and then we can love what we do. And I think so many people go through life and never find the thing they're good at. And I have to say, whoever did the elocution lessons or speech and drama, well, what a job they did. I mean, the late Charles Wheeler, and another great broadcaster, said that you had the most beautiful voice on radio ever.
I know.
It's quite an
loved
accolade,
him.
isn't it?
I knew him when I worked on Newsnight. I worked on Newsnight before I went to the Today programme and then on to Woman's Hour. And Charles was the most charming, and also, I was a young journalist suddenly working on a big national programme, Newsnight, and it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And Charles was always there to help. He was really kind, and if I was stuck on trying to get some writing right, he would come and help me. He was
he was a proper gent, wasn't he? Absolutely.
A proper gent, a beautiful writer, and he also had an extraordinarily beautiful voice.
And of course, father-in-law for many, many years.
Yes.
To the current Prime Minister, which...
Correct.
Not many people will know.
No longer.
No. So, I mean, Jen, you go on.
Oh, I'm sure I shouldn't have said that.
You go on, and you take the helm of this programme, which was already incredibly well established, had been around for just over 40 years. And you stay there for 33 years. I mean, did you love doing it? Did you feel it was you in the end?
I absolutely loved it. I would wake up in the morning and think, how did I get to be so lucky?
Did you really?
Yeah, I really did. Because the programme covered everything I would have been interested in anyway. The books I wanted to read, the plays I wanted to see, the music I wanted to listen to. And then it also, because I got a lot of current affairs experience after having worked on Newsnight, we covered politics and current events and everything.
I know.
Yes, I know you know.
Yes,
we have had an encounter, I think, at some point.
Yes, I appeared on your programme, and it was good. I mean, it was interesting, wasn't it? Because the way that you did politics, as it were, is it was perhaps in a much gentler manner than perhaps a Paxman would or someone like that.
People might suggest that it was gentler, but
in style.
But I always got underneath it.
Yeah.
The way to do it, I often think, is to lull people, which you might be doing now, into a false sense of security, and then the killer question.
Well, you did it very, very well. And women's issues, I mean, you must be very proud of being part of that. And it's been a movement, really, hasn't it? It's not a left or right issue, a movement that women have advanced in society through those years.
And we are currently at a very worrying moment.
Yes, I know you've spoken out already on this trans issue, which seems to get, for many people, more confusing by the day. I think the American swimmer, Leah Thomas, you know, somebody who'd gone through male puberty, 6'3", big hands, is 550th ranked man in the world, and suddenly, as a woman, is winning everything, and people are very confused and very concerned. And you might have heard earlier, I did a little report about
the little girl in school.
I mean, this is horrifying.
I read about that this morning in the papers. It is absolutely horrifying that a school allows a whole group of girls who've been persuaded by somebody talking about it's okay to be trans and, you know, biology doesn't matter and all of that nonsense that's coming out, and to allow a whole bunch of girls to attack a girl who says, no, hang on, biology does matter. There are two sexes. You can't change your sex. You can change your gender, but you can't change your sex. So many people, I think, have been confused about the difference between sex and gender, and that was really what made me cross the first time. I was one of the early ones to get into trouble for it. You know, people keep accusing me of being a TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist. I'll take the feminist, I won't take the radical. You know, a woman with a husband and 2 sons can't call herself a radical feminist, really, can she? But I am not trans-exclusionary by any
No, I mean, we're not talking here about intolerance towards other people, are we?
Not at all. What I became angry about was the suggestion that, number one, you could change your sex, you could stop referring to women as women and refer to them as period havers or bleeders, or, you know, all those ridiculous things. Talk about breastfeeding as chest feeding. And I just thought, hang on, you can't change the language. You cannot erase women.
Do you think there's a fight back now coming?
Yeah.
I feel it.
Yeah, there is, definitely. The best thing was just before the election, the local elections, was the group who said, respect my sex if you want my ex, because we ain't going to vote for anybody who can't tell us what a woman is. You know, we have to be really clear.
I think there is a fight back coming on this. I really, really do. And being such a public figure, you know, you've shared many things. I mean, you shared the fact that you had cancer, breast cancer, and you couldn't avoid sharing that, I suppose, because you were away, and you've dealt with that. And your most recent fight is against diabetes.
Well, it was against obesity, really. Yeah. I mean, I never became type 2 diabetic. I was teetering on the edge of type 2 diabetes. Yeah. And I changed my doctor. I used to have a lovely woman, and she, like me, was fat. And she never said, I think it's time you lose weight. I mean, my weight just went up steadily over the years as I dieted and stopped dieting.
None of it worked.
Dieting doesn't work because your body becomes very acutely aware of, it's all the little hormones rushing around to your brain saying, oh my God, she's starving, make her eat, and you become terribly hungry. It's a very complicated process. But my new doctor, a man who I love very much, and he said, look, I really think it's time you did something about it. And I did. I had surgery because I knew it was the only way, because I dieted and not dieted, dieted and not dieted. And I thought, why ruin your life by constantly being on a diet? Because I actually quite enjoy food. And so I had the surgery, a very large proportion of my stomach was removed. And it was all quite frightening. But actually, after it was done, it wasn't frightening at all.
Good.
I've lost more than half my body weight.
Well done, you. And you've now got a new Ukrainian family living with you, I understand.
I have, yes. Oh, my goodness. Saturday night, I was invited to one of my very close friends' birthday parties. And I thought, OK, how do I handle this? Party starts 7:30. Eurovision Song Contest starts 8 o'clock. I have to be back home in time for the Ukrainian and the UK performances. So I left the party very early, and we all, the three of us, sat there, mum, son, he's 17, and we watched it. And then, of course, that nightmarish count began, where were they going to go? Were they going to go up? Were they going to go down? And the UK kept rising and rising.
We did well.
What?
We did well, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
And eventually, we got to the stage where we were voting, and I said, well, I'm voting for Ukraine, so I voted for Ukraine. They said, we will... I said, no, you can't. You're not allowed. You're Ukrainian.
Yeah.
So they voted for the UK, and we just sat there and cheered when Ukraine won, and we were second. And in the past, I've always got really cross when the voting has been very political.
Oh, I know.
Eastern European countries have voted for each other.
Maybe
Cyprus.
Brexit Britain's now been accepted. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, I'm not going to talk to you about Brexit at all, as you know.
It's fine. We run out of time anyway,
you know.
and I've avoided it.
But the politics in this one was fine. Ukraine deserved it.
I want to say thank you very much for coming on as my guest. Fascinating and well done for everything you've done in broadcasting. Brilliant. Dame Jenny,
Cheers.
Thank you very much indeed.
Again.
Thank you.
Cheers.
We're coming towards the end of the programme, but it is always time for Barrage the Farage. We've got 60 seconds left. We'll ask Dame Jenny if she thinks Amber Heard, Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy are feminist icons.
No, actually, I haven't been watching the Amber Heard thing, but I have been watching what's been going on here.
Yep.
And my reaction to it was, oh, for God's sake, the pair of you, grow up. You're taking the position of women back 20 years, bitching at each other, being nasty to each other. Where's the sisterly solidarity?
Well, I think that is absolutely right. And I tell you what, that's such a... I mean, I couldn't agree more. I can't bear reading this Wagatha Christie stuff every day in the newspapers. It is pretty awful. It is pretty petty. And I think a very good note on which to end this evening's programme. I'm going to be back with you tomorrow evening at the same time. And don't forget, I'm going to be in Aylesbury next Thursday. We've still got a few tickets left. If you want to come along to that live show, go to the GBNews website. But that's it from me. I'm handing over now to Mark Stein.
Hey, great stuff, Nigel,
so
and
much.
I am with you and Jenny Murray on that Wagatha Christie nonsense. On tonight's Mark Stein Show, we need a decisive end to the last 2 years. Instead, the geniuses who've wrecked everything want to carry on wrecking everything. We'll talk about the cost of living and the human cost of these last 2 years, and the plan to render democracy even more irrelevant to rule by experts by giving tons of power to the useless World Health Organization. All that coming up after the weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weather's on a bit of a repeat cycle at the moment. Plenty of fine, bright, sunny weather by day. Thunderstorms around in the evening and at night. Here's the culprit. Big area of low pressure, but way out west and throwing weather fronts our way, but also drawing up warm and humid air from the south, hence the risk of thunderstorms. Some big downpours around at the moment, and so we'll see more of those heavy downpours across northern England and Scotland through the evening. The potential for a bit of lightning and thunderstorms across East Anglia and the southeast, but they all tend to clear away, so most places dry for much of the night, turning drier across Northern Ireland through the evening. Temperatures dropping down to 9, 10, 11 degrees Celsius generally, and for most it's going to be a fine day tomorrow. Yes, there'll be some showers, certainly through the morning across the Highlands, the Northern Isles and the Western Isles, but even here they should tend to drift away. And for most it's dry and bright, hazy sunshine for most of the day. Perhaps not quite as warm as today, but temperatures still getting a touch above average, high teens, low 20s, maybe 24 there in the capital. But we will see more clouds spilling in the afternoon back to Northern Ireland, and the threat of showers returning to the southwest. A bit of a pincer movement with a weather front bringing heavy rain to Northern Ireland, showers developing more widely over England and Wales. And look at this, some really nasty looking heavy rain potentially coming into parts of eastern England during Wednesday night into the early hours of Thursday morning. Thunderstorms likely, a lot of rain falling in a short space of time. You may get woken up by the weather tomorrow night. But again, it all clears out of the way, and bar a few showers in the northwest, generally Thursday for most of us. Dry, fine, with some lengthy spells of sunshine. Still quite breezy across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but light winds elsewhere, and feeling pretty pleasant in the sunshine, with temperatures again getting into the high teens or maybe up into 22 or 23.